like to just start off by something that I wrote about Lennart that was kind of inside me and just waiting for an opportunity to blurt out. And that opportunity came when we announced that Lennart was going to join us here this summer. Lennart Anderson is not only a preeminent figurative painter for our time, he's among the remaining few who embody the nobility, humility, and grace that is at the origins of our craft's core. This is a painter who has been endowed with prodigious gifts, an exquisite fluid draftsmanship, and a plastic virtuosity. Those of you who think plastic is just a word that describes the idea of bringing disparate things together into a unified whole. And as in plastic painting, virtuosity has been elicited from viewers manifold sensations of tactile wonder and eloquent and poetic sensibility that evokes in us a deep empathy with the subject, the empathy he himself felt in painting it. And in bringing all these endowments to a lifetime of work, Lennart has always, with great dignity, stayed the course above the exploitations that virtuosity often licenses. Facile emotionalisms, gushing sublimes, and a straining after effect that do nothing but defeat their own object. Lennart Anderson's hold on formal restraints and that finely tempered pictorial intellect he placed in the way of his prodigious gifts brought forth moving works of art only a true master is able to bring. I don't know any painter that I've contacted who has had, meaning contacted personally, who has had a greater impact on me, including Dickinson. My attraction to Dickinson was very much on the language level, on the seeing level, but on the sensibility level, he was very much, the Baroque painter, the romantic, and I've always been very drawn to Lennart's more detached, more Italian approach, and I really can't think of a painter who's influenced me more and, in a sense, formed me than this man here. And many of you, I think whatever it is that I picked up from Lennart, either listening to him or looking at his work over the years, is something that I've tried in my own way to pass over, and it is certainly a part of me now. And so it's a great privilege and a great pleasure to introduce Lennart Anderson, and also to announce that Lennart is going to be the recipient of the first Jerusalem Prize for Painting, which is a monetary prize. He deserves much, much more, and we wish we could all do that. But it's still with great pleasure that we introduce him. Would you please welcome Lennart Anderson?
My first year in graduate school, after about 4 months of graduate school, I began to work with the figure, or with portraiture, and the school was of a different sort, and I thought that I would make my way to New York on my first trip by selling portraits, so I sold a bunch of them for $15 a piece. The first slide was not sold for $15 a piece. Sorry, $15 price. So we'll start with a painting of Dave Gordon, 1951. A 16 by 20 inch painting. Larger than any head that I've painted since, I think, which means I didn't know what I was doing quite. There was no history for my painting of this sort, really. This is, I think, around the second year in graduate school, and I will throw in a few stories. the first female nude I ever saw. I was 14 years old, and she was modeling in Detroit, my hometown. And I went to a Saturday art school. I went to an art school on Saturday, and she was the model. And that would have been like 1943. And when I got to graduate school, lo and behold, she was taking the bus out to Cranbrook and posing. And but she wasn't, because people weren't using her, so she sat around. And one day, I decided that I would paint her. And we did this. I remember the figure, the torso, the whole thing was pretty much done, but she had made the bust and the head was really put in about 5 minutes. So then I would continue the story. Years later, I think it was like 1975. This is 51. Somewhere when I went to Maryland to show my slides, I showed this slide. And after after I was finished, there was a professor or an instructor in Maryland who came up to me to tell me that this was his wife. And she was then a potter. And this is an attempt to paint a very emotional subject, as if I were a camera. It looks like an expressionist painting, perhaps, but it really wasn't. I had taken up Degas as a model of detachment, and that was what I kind of was using as a word to paint by, to be detached. And I tried to paint a scene which was very emotional in the most detached way. And this has to do with certain kind of photography. The figure in the foreground is seen as moving. So he's seeing what's happening, and he's moving away from it. And to add to the symbolism, I made him a priest. He wasn't moving towards the problem. He was moving away from it. The sign on the back wall with the beginning of the letters is stop. It had a lot of things in it, this picture, that I never really tended to get. I didn't paint with that much idea in painting, except very rarely. The figure being compared to glowing paper. And I was very, in both of these last pictures, the nude as well as this, Velasquez was someone that meant a lot. And of course, he's kind of the exemplar of detachment. Next, this is a tiny 7 by 9 or 8 by 10 little still life that I did in Detroit the year after graduation. I painted in a tiny little room on the top floor of an apartment house near the Detroit River. And this is, I think maybe this is reversed, I'm not sure. I think it is. There's something I did in this painting that was, I think it's a very nice painting, but the fact that I broke the ground plane with a piece of paper, putting it at an angle, was something that, a device that I used for years. The scenes, the objects were placed on a kind of like a kitchen chair that has curves. You know, it has this was also done in Detroit, in that little room. The thing that I put that shot glass is something that shows up in my still lifes occasionally. And the thing that I did that is different is to put the dark object in the dark shadow contained in that spot. This is one of the first paintings I did in New York in 1953. Moved to New York in August of 1953. Which turned out to be the hottest month on record in New York. Although they might be eating it this month, I don't know. but it was very hot, and my friend Richard Sarin and I rented a loft space on 38th Street between Madison and Park, if anybody knows where that is. It's a block away from Lord and Taylor. And the place was run by a woman out of Tennessee Williams. A lot of drugs and shouting at night and Art Deco, and it was just a mixture of things. And we were on the top floor for that fall. Decided to go back to, there were 4 of us that came to New York, actually, and Richard drove the car, but he decided that he wanted to go home. And I decided I would probably have to go home too, but I wanted to get a gallery. And in the meantime, I decided, I approached Roy Davis, a gallery that I was familiar with from Fairfield Porter's reviews. I hope these names I'm dropping because they're history, and they'd be better known probably in the States. But Fairfield Porter's a painter, and he wrote little reviews in Art News, and he had written about the Davis Gallery. So I had been going there, and I thought, without going home, going back to Detroit, I would go to the Davis Gallery and see if they might want to let me be a part of the gallery. So I remember taking David Gordon's picture with me, and he told me that I wasn't, he didn't think I had enough work or for a show, so, but he didn't want me to leave New York, which was a very important thing for him to say, because he then called his frame maker, who was the best frame maker probably in the world, and asked him if he could find a place for me in the shop. And so I worked for Robert Kulick for 3 years or so, cutting and joining frames. When this was done on 74th Street, on the Upper East Side in a rooming house, and I was living there until the spring of '54. Until they decided to turn the house into a fancy apartment house, and so I moved downtown, first to East 6th Street, and then to 10th Street, and then finally to 4th Street, all within about a year. But this was painted on 71st uptown in a really grungy, on the Upper East Side rooming house.